startup evangelist, Amazon Internet Services. Please make some noise for Mr. Sandeep Lakshman, ladies and gentlemen, our moderator this evening. Let's call upon our panelists. Lucas Bianchi, founder and CEO, Namaste Credit. Our next panelist this evening is going to be Neerav Parekh, founder, VPraise. That's Mr. Neerav Parekh. The next panelist this evening is going to be Pramod Singh, Vice President, Data Sciences and Analytics, Yodlee. Make some noise for Mr. Pramod Singh, please. I now request all of you to welcome with me Mr. Prashant Ranganathan, founder and CEO, PaySense. And the last but not the least is going to be Vaishali Kasture, Managing Director and India Country Head, Experian. Make some noise for Vaishali Kasture. Sandeep, it's all yours now. This is our last track. I request everybody to be seated, give them your full, and you give them your full. Let's see if you can get us a house full here.
Thank you, Muskan. So, before we start, good evening.
Good evening.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm a hardcore Bombayite, and I'm ashamed to see this kind of a response. Bombay is a city of energy. Come on. Good evening.
Good evening.
No, the guys at the showcases behind, all the startups, they're all gone to sleep. Guys, startups, you have to have a lot of energy. Once more, last time, all of you together. Good evening. Fantastic. So guys, we have an awesome panel over here. And, data is the new oil. And someone actually said, oil is gone, it should be data is the new lithium-ion batteries. Right? Before we start, I would like our panelists to quickly introduce themselves for the benefit of the audience. Guys, we have like a fantastic panel over here. Very interesting guys doing a lot of interesting stuff with data. So, Lucas, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Lucas Bianchi, founder of Namaste Credit. We are a marketplace for SME loans, and we put together on one side a number of lenders, on the other side a number of borrowers and channel partners. And in between, there's a lot of data that has to be interpreted, analyzed, used, and so we've developed a platform that does that very efficiently, and so that's what's kind of leading to our success.
Hello everyone, I'm Neerav Parekh. I'm the founder of VPraise. We built an AI product that analyzes data and gives you the insights in words. So what we do is we help companies make the reports easier to understand by providing the key insights in a few bullet points. So rather than having to look at all the cluttered dashboards and charts, we give you the insights in language which you can just read and understand.
Hello, I'm Pramod Singh. I'm a Chief Analytics Officer of a company called Investment Yodlee. It's a Bay Area company helping customers across the world lead a better financial life. Right? So we use a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning to go derive insight from the transactional data and do it for not only the transactions, for the users as well. And we have customers across the banks and fintechs and the hedge funds all over the world. Thank you.
I'm Prashant Ranganathan. I'm the founder and CEO of PaySense. We're a consumer lending startup. We actually do a full stack lending product along with India Infoline, who's our lending partner. Prior to founding PaySense, I was the regional head of product for PayPal. And so yeah, I'm very excited to contribute to the session.
Hi, I'm Vaishali and I'm the Managing Director for Experian. We are the world's largest credit bureau, been in the country for about 10 years. And in India, we have a focus not just on bureau, but things like decision analytics and direct to consumer as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Vaishali. So guys, I'm going to be more comfortable standing up and talking, but you don't need to stand up and give an answer. So first question, Vaishali, I would ask you, right? I did a startup before this, and I used to always cringe when I would get a letter from a credit card company saying, sorry, you have been rejected. Right? And I think there might be a few startup founders who face that fear. So my question to you is this, right? How does Experian use data? What do you do? Can you talk about it? Can you talk about what insights you get?
A very loaded question. I could go on for hours, but I'll try and keep it crisp. I think everybody in this ecosystem will be aware. And I see a lot of fintechs here in the lending space. I see a lot of people in the credit advisory space. What we tried, I mean, our objective obviously is there's 1.2 billion people in this country. And if I were to tell you in a nutshell, we have, by virtue of RBI regulations, we are a licensed entity, and we have data on 300 million consumers in India. If you have ever taken a credit card or a loan or had any sort of transaction with a bank or borrowed from a bank in any form or capacity, your details will be in the bureau. But that's just one part of the story. We have, I mean, our goal is around financial inclusion. So whether it is core bureau data or any other data, our objective is if you're looking to integrate any sort of credit information on an individual or commercial entity, you'll find it in Experience. So that's what we do.
That's very interesting. So essentially, you use a lot of data to find out whether people are eligible for, example, a credit card, right? Do credit scoring. Prashant, you do something very similar. I mean, essentially, the process is quite similar, right? You give out loans up to 2 lakhs, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so, what do? Do you also rely on data like what you get from Experience, Sibyl, or others, or do you use other data sources?
Yeah, so I think in this world of alternate lending or alternate data sources for lending, there are a lot of ways to serve a customer, and customers that remain unserved largely by the banks and the NBFCs of the market today. So actually we use data across the full stack, which is everything from acquiring a consumer to onboarding a consumer to basically getting them through the funnel process, to underwriting them through payments and then collections. And I'll just touch upon each of them very quickly. So when we acquire users, obviously if we just went out in the open market and acquired every consumer that we possibly could find, that would actually not be a very cost-efficient way to serve our customers. So in fact, data plays a huge role in predetermining who we should go out and acquire. And that is actually, so every time we talk to an investor or a partner, they are hugely surprised by how much efficiency we have in the top of our funnel and through the funnel. And that is all powered by data. In fact, there are very few humans who actually touch the acquisition process. Everything is actually generated. The data that is used to ultimately go and acquire the users is generated by the system, and the ads are then kind of placed in the various social networks or the various networks to acquire the user. That user is then brought through the funnel, and the data plays a huge role in kind of figuring out what specifics should be asked. And then that's obviously kind of goes into underwriting, and then to drive repayments and collections and the whole lot. So it's a very critical part of every aspect of what we do, and in fact, it is what differentiates us from the rest of the pack.
That's very interesting, right? One of the things that you said is your data and the way you analyze your data actually separates out you from what others do. I'm going to quickly jump to Lucas here right now because Lucas also does lending, but it is more for SMEs. Lucas, how differently you use data as compared to Prashant?
Yeah, so our data use is quite different because on one side we have quite a number of traditional lenders. Kind of imagine 30 of the largest lenders in India, from ICICI to HDFC to Bajaj, L&T, etc. And they really haven't moved into a process of underwriting like Prashant. And what they do is they collect physical documents from borrowers, and they have a whole set of documents that are required, and it takes them a long time to kind of go through it, grab the data manually, et cetera, et cetera. And pretty much almost every lender in India is like this today, the ones that we work with at least. And so our platform actually takes scanned documents and converts them into data that those lenders can use, efficiently rather than manually. So we use octopus character recognition and grab all the relevant data and numbers that a banker might want. So we effectively on the fly create what lenders today already use, which is a credit assessment memo, a CAM report, a credit assessment memo, using technology.
Now, you brought up a very interesting point, Lucas, and the reason I said that is you said you use AI to do OCR to convert physical documents into data, right? Now, one thing which I have seen quite common, I work as a startup evangelist for the AWS platform, and I speak to a lot of startups. And what typically comes off is right now, AI ML is kind of the buzzword. Every startup is doing AI ML. So my question is to Pramod now. Pramod, I want to understand from you. You have done a lot of analytics. You do a lot of analytics accurately, right? Is there a difference between AI ML and analytics? Are they the same? Do they work together? I mean, can you clear it out for me and for the audience in here?
Thanks, Prashant. I think I get this question asked almost at every forum that you can think of, right? And if you look through the journey of the so-called analytics and AI, I think starting back, way back in mid-90s, I started working at Walmart information system. We used to call this whole thing as data mining at that time, right? And the evolution happened, right? So I am not a purist in terms of actually defining what it means. To me, if I look at analytics, and especially in the Indian setting across the world, right? We're talking about it anything from writing a formula in Excel to doing a deep neural network. I mean, that falls into that big bucket, right? But more importantly, I think what's very important is, are you able to get the value out of data, right? So if you go back to the purest definition of AI, for example, right? I mean, the intent there is to mimic the human behavior in every possible situation, right? That's what you want to do, right? Analytics, if you look at it, you want to go look at a class of data and go get value out of it. So to me, I mean, in some sense, I kind of encompass the whole space as an analytics. AI being a component of that, right? But if I get down to a bit of a mathematics there, I think you are right. You have to be careful, right? How it gets positioned and how people are using it, right? If I go back to the classical computer science definition, I think the AI requires a lot more sophisticated classes of algorithms and not just writing a decision tree or just writing a regression things, right? But what is very important as we go look into the startup world or even the established companies, what is very important is, are you able to go take your data and put intelligence on top of it to get value, right? Whether that value is coming through writing a very sophisticated algorithm or value is coming from understanding and doing things, right? In that ecosystem, I have been a big proponent of, if you're really trying to get value, I always call it a three-legged stool. And the three legs, in my opinion, are what I call the classical machine learning, AI, mathematics, right? You need to have deep roots into that. The second part is that even though you may have really strong machine learning and AI, you need to have a very strong engineering component to take those models to the scale and run that. And third, one of the most important components, to have the business domain knowledge. But you need to understand what classes of problems are you solving, are they relevant to the domain you are solving, right? And if you have all these three components very well gelled together, you will be a very strong analytics computer, right? So I don't really go after the purest definition, but it's very important that you are using the classes of data and getting value out of it, right? That's what I want.
Interesting. So you're saying that essentially that it doesn't matter whether you do AI or you do ML or you do analytics, as long as it gets the job done.
That's exactly right. I'd like to add a point over there to explain it in a very simple way for the audience. I think analytics, whenever you do analysis, you're just coming up with numbers, you're coming up with metrics. Intelligence is how you use those metrics to take decisions. So when the machine is taking the decisions basis the numbers, that is when we call it artificial intelligence. So I think we go and talk to a lot of clients, we talk at a lot of forums. What we've seen is people just mix everything. AI, ML, and analytics, everything is completely mixed. I don't think so. The analytics has been there forever. We've been analyzing numbers forever. There are new ways of doing it. But then after you've done the analysis, after you got the numbers, how do you use those numbers to take decisions? Earlier, people used to look at those numbers and take decisions. Now we are programming machines to look at those numbers and take decisions by themselves. That is what is artificial intelligence. It can be a very simple use case of deciding, okay, if this is above 5%, do this. If this is below 5%, do this. This is also intelligence that you're feeding into the system. But when that 5% is defined through learning, through machine learning, through data, then the machine is able to define the threshold and then take decision basis that threshold. Is when the true artificial intelligence comes in.
If I may add a very simple example to illustrate that point. So as I was driving over here thinking about your question, I was looking at the fuel gauge in my car. Right? The fuel gauge in my car is doing pure analytics. Right? It's telling me how much fuel is left to empty. But right next to it, there is another sensor that says distance to 0. Now, one is just a point-in-time view of what is happening. It's a very physical measurement, and it's very accurate. The other one is predictive. So analytics is nothing but something that's descriptive, whereas AI and ML is something that's predictive. It's predicting that given the traffic condition, given the number of gear changes over the last few minutes, given the rate of consumption and the way the driver is driving the car, you have these many kilometers to go before you run out of gas. Right? So that is a very simple illustration of AI, perhaps. And in our business, I think I do have engineers who quite often confuse the same. They say, "Oh, I'm doing AI," because I think it gives them an extra zero in their paycheck if they have an ML kind of background. But I think analytics is an analyst is someone who can basically give you a point in time sense of what has happened or what is happening, right? Dashboarding, giving you a rate of change, etc., etc. Then there are data scientists or ML modelers who can then say, well, based on what we've learned, trained, etc., this is how we predict something is going to be an outcome, like probability of default for a given customer, right? That is predicted, and we won't know until the future if that prediction holds true or not. But we definitely know from the analytics guys that something is true or not.
So we actually do this at a granular level with optical character recognition, right? Where you kind of have to predict, what is this letter? What is this number? So that's what we do as well.
That's very interesting. I love the analogy of the speed gauge. Right? It makes it so simple. Sorry, fuel gauge. My apologies. The other interesting thing which I think about artificial intelligence is, if you think about how the early internet companies build their business, right? So if you take Google, the entire business was built upon the search algorithm, which was proprietary to themselves. If you take Facebook, it was the newsfeed algorithm, which was proprietary to themselves. In the current world, most of the AI algorithms are open source. TensorFlow is open source. Amazon has its AI called MXNet, which is open source, right? So algorithm is no longer your secret sauce, right? The other interesting thing is when we had commissioned Nucleus Software to do an analysis of all the AI workloads which were running. Interestingly, what came up was most of them tend to use TensorFlow, and amongst that, they prefer to use AWS, right? But my question is this: given that now AI algorithms are open source, you can use them, how important does your data become, right? And I'm going to keep it open to anyone to answer here.
I think very good point, Sandeep, right? When I go back look at my career, I think in mid-90s, SAS, which was a leader in this the so-called analytics space, right? They came up with a data science kind of suite called Enterprise Miner. I remember even at that time in the US, one copy was upwards of $100,000. Completely proprietary, restricted to a certain number of people, only few companies and individuals could afford that. And from there, I think a couple of professors in New Zealand started something called R, right? Which was open source. And fundamentally, that changed the world, right? That so-called Thomas Davenport things about world being flat, I think, came there. And I've been watching that over the last 15 years. If you look through that, in 90s, even through early part of this century, there was pretty much a monopoly with, SAS and SPSS who had all the algorithms with that. And with the open source movement coming in, the classes of algorithms, the kid in India or a third world country can have access to the same algorithm as the biggest companies across anywhere in the world, right? So I do believe that humongous amount of democratization has come in, right? So what is very important is now the classes of algorithms is available to everybody, right? And what I said earlier, right? What do you do with that? The real value is how can you take your own data and classes of solutions that you can do with those algorithms is there where the competitive advantage is, right? The competitive advantage is not using a class of TensorFlow, but the TensorFlow on the class of data. Do you understand the exact problem you're trying to solve, right? What kind of data normalization you want to do, what kind of variables you want to create, and what value you want to go bring out of it, right? But I do believe that the fundamental shift, if you look in last 8 to 10 years, right, I mean, in this conference itself, there's so many startups in the AI space, right, but are you solving the right problem, right, what are the real differentiators here?
I think Vaishali wants to.
Trying to make a similar point that, we're in the business of solving customers' problems. I deal with banks, NBFCs, startups. Nobody really cares how I solve the problem as long as I do, right? So whether I'm using open source, I'm using my own proprietary algorithms, the problem statement is 1.2 billion people in this country. Everybody wants to get to know the customer better. If it's their fraud, their credit profile, their ability to borrow, it's just knowing your customer better, their network. Everybody wants a view on the customer. And I don't think the clients whom I work with, whether it's banks, financial institutions, e-commerce firms, they want a solution and they don't care how I get the answer as long as I get them the right answer, whether it's open source or not, whether it's AI or ML or it's an Excel sheet. If I can give them data, sanitized, correct data and a 360-degree customer view which can't go wrong, I don't think anybody cares. So when people sort of tend to ask, is this AI or analytics, is it open source or not? I'm like, as long as it solves the problem, you can call it, XYZ, who cares? As long as I'm giving the solution to my client.
Neera, do you have a different view on this?
Yeah. So I think for a long time we had a similar kind of experience, like she said, where companies are just interested in the solution, not exactly how you do it. But lately what we've seen is innovation teams within these large enterprises, they come to us and they tell us, okay, we want to solve this problem and we want you to use AI and ML to solve this problem. Then we look at the problem and say, this does not require AI or ML. Why do you want to use AI? They said that we have a mandate. If you can't do it, let us go to someone else. But we have a mandate to do it. And the other challenge that we've seen is,
they want a solution and you should say, this is AI, they won't figure out.
So the other problem that we've seen is they want us to use AI and ML with just 100 records, 150 records. They don't have the data, they cannot share the data, they don't have the data ready as well. The amount of data which is required to properly implement machine learning. But they want to use machine learning, they want to use AI. So I think there is some disconnect somewhere where people just want to ride this fad and just show that we are using AI, we are using ML, without actually understanding what it is and what it is used for. So there are places where human intelligence can very well work and solve your problem. You don't need artificial intelligence there, but they still want to use that. That is something that we started experiencing recently.
So I've been saying that use RI, the real intelligence, before you start using AI, right? Artificial intelligence.
That's very interesting, Lucas.
Yeah, I would just add to that one more thing. Basically, I'm from the US. I've spent most of my career in New York and, followed Wall Street as a tech analyst. And so what I see in India that differentiates India from the US is actually a lot more data on the ground, as opposed to, in an organization, in an organized format. And so, that comes around to, more simple, basic stuff like just getting the right data in the first place. Garbage in, garbage out, and that's even more so with these advanced things like AI, etc. Right? If you actually feed it garbage in the first place, then you're hopeless, right? Because you actually come up with the wrong signals. Whether I look across, e-commerce companies here that, have to a certain extent struggled to touch all 1.2 billion people, and then I look at what's happening on the ground with like the lenders that we deal with, and I have funded those 300 million or 400 million borrowers. Like they send out armies of people that are doing things on the ground, and that is how the fundamental data is getting kind of created here. So I guess along those lines, I was thinking about these issues, and that's why we focused on creating a solution that enables the lender to get the data from the ground and then actually use it in a higher level kind of sense, at some point down the line.
Prashant, you've been very quiet on this question. I'm very, very interested to know what do you think? Like you deal with a lot of data, right?
Yeah.
Do you think data is the new moat? Is data the moat for your business? Or you need to be sure what information is being collected, like Lucas said, garbage in, garbage out? What is your point of view?
Yeah, so I do think data is a requisite, but perhaps not a sufficient condition, and I think that's what the whole panel is saying. And I also do, I think data is kind of like crude oil. To go back to your theme of the topic, it is very much crude oil, right? Unless you know what to do with crude oil, it's worth nothing, right? It's worth, you can buy it by barrels and it's worth nothing. But I think if you can then, to Lucas's point, if you can extract the right amount of value in a very efficient way, in a very timely way, and then to kind of create customer delight, then you've got a moat. Then you've got something. I also feel like, if Nandan Nilekani has his way, data is going to be available to everyone on everyone. So I don't think you can say, well, it's a matter of time, right? It's like, today we have a lot of data that's scattered in very unstructured formats, but another maybe 10 years of Modi and another 15 years of Nandan Nilekani, and I think all this data will kind of be at least structured in some format, perhaps not cleansed to the extent that we would all like it, but it'll become available. So I think in some ways you have to build robustness to that. You have to build to a level where you say, well, if all this data were to become available, and end of the day, it's the owner of that data is the customer, and the customer will move to move that data from one entity to another, as long as they kind of experience the right levels of delight. So I think that's ultimately what will end up happening. So it's all about then what can you do with that data, how quickly can you do it, and what is your, it's not like, okay, yeah, I have this ML model running or this AI model running on this data, but like, did you really solve the customer pain point in a meaningful way, in a timely way, in an efficient way that will ultimately differentiate you from everyone else.
Neerav?
Yeah. So my opinion is that so far some companies have used data as a moat to defend them, to safeguard themselves. But I think going ahead with technologies like blockchain, where the data is going to be on distributed ledgers, and the people who are creating the data are actually going to decide who gets access to that data, I think increasingly companies will not be able to use data as a moat. So there will be a lot of different other things that they need to use to differentiate themselves and protect themselves, but data would not be one of them. And that is where I think data is fundamentally different from oil. So oil was finite and can be used by only for one single use. With data is not finite. You can keep on generating data. And the other thing is data can be reused by multiple parties. So I have my usage data, how I interact on the internet, what I buy, what I do. That data I can share with X, I can share with Y, I can share with Z, and all three of them can use it. So I think going ahead, companies cannot rely on just having data to safeguard themselves. I think data will be available to everyone, and it will be reusable.
I'd like to add the point that I meet a lot of companies every day who come to us because we are a bureau and we also do analytics. The amount of data that is being captured, I mean, just because there is access to data, just because you can, whether it is email metadata, whether it is SMS data, all kinds of data. I think data is not a moat anymore. Everybody has the data, but it's the insight that you're going to get into it. You may have like 1 billion data points, but how do you articulate and boil it down to what's really maybe only that 2 million or 3 million data points are relevant for you? My worry is there is too much data in the system and very few people who understand how to interpret or use it. So in my mind, data is not a moat anymore. It's very easy to access.
That's very interesting. So essentially, I have a kind of a tussle in the panel right now. There's Prashant who's saying that data is like oil. We have finite sources. You get petrol. I apply AI. I can see how far my car goes, right? And on the other hand, we have Neerav here who's saying, no, data is like sunlight. You can get all the sunlight you want. It depends on how good your solar panels are, how many solar panels you have, and then you can generate the amount of electricity that you actually have. But I kind of agree. We collect a lot of data, Vaishali. I totally agree with that. Any app that you download that asks for access to your SMS is scary to me, right? And the reason it is scary to me is because in my SMSs are my bank transactions, and my entire history is over there, right? It can tell you where I spent, what I spent, what's my bank balance, everything, where I withdrew the ATM, right? Just through access of my messages on my phone. So I'm going to put it open to the panel, and Vaishali, I would like to hear from you, given you represent Experian. What is your thought on security in a world where data is freely available?
In a we are a bureau and our life is based on making sure that we protect data, keep it safe, and only share it with people who have a right to see the data. So we're completely on one side where we're absolutely anal about data protection, and on the other hand, we have we have an ecosystem where just in the lending space, people are building business models by saying that they have access to certain data and interpreting it. I mean, which is great. I mean, if you look at other countries, it isn't as regulated. My worry is that one side you have extreme regulation, which is, in my mind, some of it is really good. On the other hand, you have extreme no control on the kind of data you're scraping, just because a consumer ticks a box when you download an app which says you can access my emails, you can access my SMSs. So what's important here is understanding your social responsibility when you have access to data, and when you store this data, the consumer is naive, he's giving you access, but when you're utilizing the data, I think every firm out here needs to make sure that you carry the sole responsibility of protecting and using that data in a manner which is appropriate. And today we have a lot of data, but I think the awareness, both on the consumer side when they allow you access to data, and as a firm or a fintech, usage of that data and protecting that data is something which we don't talk enough about, and I worry about that.
I think for me, it's a question of privacy versus convenience. The more I'm paranoid about my privacy, the more I restrict access to my data, the less convenience I'll have. So think about everyone, just think about the phones that you're using. You're sharing information with Google and the amount of convenience that you're getting. So when I'm about to leave for office, Google tells me, okay, on your regular route, the traffic is slow and you need 10 minutes more to reach. When I'm about to go home, it will tell me 10 minutes in advance that on your route, this is how the traffic is. So that is additional convenience for me. Obviously, you're not dying without that convenience, but then there will be some people who value that convenience more than all the issues that we have around privacy. I think we need to balance it. So we should obviously have safeguards around privacy of data, and we should be very protective about it. But then we should not be very paranoid about it. So if we keep all the data to ourselves, then think about Aadhaar. Now, taking a new SIM card, opening a new bank account, it's like a few seconds job. Earlier, you had to submit so many different documents, and probably a few days before you actually get the transaction done. Today, you're able to do it in seconds. So, because you shared your data with the agency, they are able to create this infrastructure because of which you have this convenience. So, I think it's a question between the two.
But I don't necessarily agree with that point of view, right? And because encryption is easy today, right? Like, if you want to encrypt your data, which is on AWS, and that's just the first level of security, just take a box which says encrypt, and your data is encrypted, right? So I don't think it's like convenience versus security. I want to open it to Prashant and Pramod, because you guys deal with a lot of data as well. Do you think it's a factor of convenience versus security?
Let me take that, right? You're absolutely right. I mean, there are a couple of things that we are looking here, right? What are we doing with the data, right? I think what's happening is at an individual level for big companies like us, we have to do everything possible to go protect the privacy, right? And we are doing that. As a company like us, we put a lot of effort into the processes, encryption. What we do is something called a PII masking, right? So anything remotely connected to a PII, I mean, we use AI algorithms to go mask that. But what is important is when you have data in...
Sorry, so guys, do you know what is PII? Yeah. PII is personally identifiable information, stuff like your email address. Right?
So anything like your name, your Aadhaar number, or a US social security number, even your address. When we take a very extreme view, even zip code will consider associated with you to be PII. So depending on what definition, but anything that can personally identify you will be a PII. Right? So a lot of companies like us take extreme amount of measure to go protect that. But the point I was trying to make, and what Nirav was saying was that how do we go use it? I think in terms of once you have de-identified the user and the transactions, the learnings you get from the crowd, right? That can be used, right? So in terms of the convenience, right? If they're able to profile that, individuals in a certain income group living in a certain part of a city, you are able to go give offers, which resonates with them, right? But the balance is for the big companies is, you want to make sure you are not directly identifying an individual, but you got to go look at the aggregated data and create value that can serve everybody, right? So that's definitely the delicate balance that you have to maintain, right? Obviously you have to take every possible precaution not to let the PII leak, right? But at the same time learn from the data and provide services that people can use.
Okay, so I have a slightly controversial view on this. So I do agree with the point that was made earlier. Privacy has a huge opportunity cost, right? As 30-something-year-olds or 40-something-year-olds sitting on a panel, it's very easy to say, well, I really am entitled to my privacy, and you know what, I'm going to do whatever, kind of have an iPhone and not an Android and this, that, and whatever. But I think, we're the has-beens, right? We're already on the other side of the hill in some ways. The incoming customer does not give a shit about privacy. They are extremely open until the point of breaking, right? So they're very open until you lose their trust. So my customer says, hey, look, I'm a 23-year-old. No one's willing to lend to me, but I'm willing to give you as much data as you want, as long as you can serve my need. Now, at the same time, I'm trusting you with this data so that you will not misuse this. And the minute you misuse it, and that could be conscious or unconscious misuse, it could be because we didn't secure the data or something else. They don't really care if my database is encrypted or if I'm using HTTPS versus not, if I care about PII versus not. They're just saying, you had my data, I trusted you with it for a service that you promised to provide. You did or you didn't. It's a very binary decision, right? And the minute I think that trust is lost, that trust is easily given, but also easily lost. And as soon as it's lost, it's gone forever. So I think I've seen companies just vaporize overnight and serving this particular audience. I think our particular generation was a little bit more paranoid, but also a little bit more tolerant. I think the incoming generation, which is who we're all looking to serve as fintechs, is neither. I think they are both, from a privacy standpoint, they have a bit of a chalega attitude. But when it comes to a breach, or when their trust is breached, I should say, they actually have a very no more BS kind of attitude. So I think I do maintain that their privacy has a huge opportunity cost. We're a little bit more entitled and privileged, hence we can make these big statements about how privacy is amazing and beautiful. But most people can't afford that opportunity cost.
Prashant, you just managed to make me feel really old right now.
Putting myself in the same camp.
Lucas, you've been a little quiet. I want to ask you, right? You collect a lot of information on businesses.
Yeah.
How do you treat privacy? I mean, for me, I know that, like the stuff that Pramod mentioned, actually have steps in ensuring that privacy is maintained for customers. Do you also do?
Yeah, I see it pretty much the same way as Prashant sees it. For the most part, people are willing to give a lot of data, and that's with the assumption that you will safeguard it. And if you don't, then there'll be repercussions down the road, right? And so, yes, in my space, that tends to be a lot of financial information, like literally hundreds of pages of financial information, of family information, of property information, all kinds of stuff. And so historically, what I've seen is here, people have kind of trusted advisors that are very close to them, that maybe they've worked with for a long time, and they're a trusted advisor, right? That could be their CA, it could be, just a financial advisor, etc. And so we tend to work with those folks and kind of convey that trust through this network effectively. Now, again, yes, our responsibility is to keep it safe, to make sure it's used for their benefit. And when that happens, then they're happy, right? So I see it very much the same way as Prashant.
So just like the oil versus solar wars which are going on, I see a new kind of war. We have the bigger experienced startups who say, no, privacy is important. The new upcoming startups say, well, we'll take a look at it. Vaishali, would you like to add something on that? Given that you've been in this industry for a really, really long time.
I think I have this anecdote that when it comes to, take the same consumer, and when we talk about privacy, when he or she is hungry for a loan, or 21-year-old, they think privacy is not an issue. But when you use the same data to go after them and collect money, privacy becomes an issue. Yeah. So there are always two sides to the same data or the same coin. But I continue to maintain that we're in a country which is in such hyper growth mode now that we tend to, I mean, as a consumer, we need to be more literate and more aware that the same data can work both ways. You're hungry, you want to share everything because, definitely, we're a firm that believes in financial inclusion, but when you're a hungry 21-year-old, you're like, you can open up my life and whatever you want, just give me that loan. And the moment you start using the same data in order to collect the funds, it becomes an issue. And we're at a stage where we're at an inflection point. There is a lot of credit gold happening, but there will be the situation 4 to 5 years down the line. We'll have doubled our books, and then there'll be a collections issue. That's when sort of the rubber hits the road. So I won't say I'll reserve my comments for 5 years, but I still continue to maintain that the provider of the information may give it to you, but it's our responsibility to use that in the proper manner and secure that data for the future.
Interesting. Any questions from the audience? Yes. We have a mic coming to you, don't worry.
Hi. The question is actually, I have a couple of questions, since no one else raised their hand. So if data is not the new mode, and AI is becoming open source, so when it becomes good enough, analysis will not be the new mode. So where is the space for a company that's not an incumbent to differentiate itself sustainably? That's one question. The second is, you can obfuscate the PIIs all you want, but given enough data exhaust and a good enough data scientist, you're going to be able to identify a person, right? So that's the end of privacy once you can do that. So how would companies cope with that?
So, would you like to take the second question first, since it's about PII?
Okay, I can take I can take both. Let me take the second one first, right? So the question was that, given enough data and power of AI, and in spite of doing all PII, you can re-identify, right? Yeah. And possibly true, right? In a rhetorical sense, people say, right, if a bad guy really wants to go kill somebody and not afraid to die, he probably will at some point of time. Time being infinite can do that, right? So the goal for where you are trying to go, and it holds true for encryption, holds true for physical security and things like that. So in general, rhetorically speaking, I do agree with what you just said, right? Because we do that for a living, as part of our AI suite, right? But obviously, what you're trying to do is you're trying to be ahead of the bad guys in some sense, right? When you do, in our case, I think it becomes very, very interesting, right? Because what we are doing is when we are trying to go derive value out of the data, I talked about masking the data, right? We will do every possible thing to be ahead of the bad guys in some sense, right? And you would not believe the kind of actual data science we put to go mask data, right? To answer your question, that if somebody really wants to go do that, they can do it. But question is, how do you distribute your data, right? To do that, if you really, there are billions of transactions that we have, there are millions of customers that we have, there are trillions of dollars of, the balances that we have, right? So you have to be seriously smart about, when you go monetize your data, that you are not giving the contiguous chunks, where that kind of risk is, exposed to you, right? So I would say it's basically a step at a time. I'm going back to the theoretical physics. It's not impossible to go re-identify. In fact, I would argue that sufficiently smart compute and smart people, you can do that, right? But we take every possible precaution for that not to happen. Right? To answer your first question,
I think Vaishali wants to answer the first one, if that's okay.
When you said, so data is not a moat anymore, what is? Just wanted to give you a very real life example. Up to 5, 6, maybe 6 years ago, on the retail banking side, a consumer could go to a bank, take a loan, not pay it back, go to another bank, take a loan. So that existed. Then came the credit bureaus, and RBI mandated 4 bureaus in the country. And then it was, so you've got a credit bureau score. So that was innovative, saying, oh, now you have a score, you have data with bureaus, and let's pull that. So data became a differentiator, saying this bank started pulling, banks that started pulling bureau scores earlier than others, whether it's on the consumer side, the commercial side. So then that data became very common among the 4 bureaus. You go to the 4 bureaus, you get the same data. Now we're at a stage where how do I differentiate from a stage of being no data 5 years ago to having data with every bureau. So we have new solutions. We will use things like apartment index, family linkages, trailing of bureau data. So the same data sits with 4 bureaus, but how you use it is different. And the value that you can add is not by saying I have this data, but you need to give very precise insights as to what you're doing. 4 bureaus have the same data, but we have different products because we give different insights. And that can be a differentiator. Just having the data is not creating a moat anymore.
I think what she's trying to say over here is very simple. Since data is not the moat anymore, I think you need to go back to the old school way of building businesses, identify a good problem, use the data to create a good solution, and ensure that you're providing a fantastic experience to the consumer in actually using that solution. I think it's just plain old school way of building a business. Just that you've taken the data and all the innovation out of it, and you're just building a simple, good business.
All right. Thank you, guys.